All right. Hello and welcome to the very first episode of what I'm planning on calling We Who Watch the Watchmen. God knows if that's going to stay. I'm probably just going to stick with whatever won't get us sued. My name is Wyatt. My co host who's joining me is going to be my older brother, Jake. Say hi, Jake.
What's up, guys?
And we are going to be this show is mostly just going to be talking about, as the name suggests, the 2009 hit movie Watchmen. We're going to do something that two is maybe a little different than other reviews are talking about that you've heard of or seen before. We're going to talk about the ultimate cut. For those of you who don't know about the ultimate cut, that is the extended cut from Zack Snyder, the director of the movie, who also added in the interstitial animated scenes based on the comic book within the comic book from the original Watchmen comic book. Now that I've said
Praise
comic
be
book
Zack
about 1,000,
Snyder.
that's part of the other reason why we're doing this. While I am not the biggest Zack Snyder fan, this is one of my favorite movies of all time, especially from him. And my co-host Jake is a diehard Zack Snyder fan.
I'm okay with being called a Snyder bot.
I'm not, but we'll get into that eventually when he probably forces us to watch through Snyder cuts on this show. But today we're going to be watching the first 15 minutes of the movie. We've got a bunch of notes taken down and some things that we want to talk about and kind of break down with the movie. And so we're just going to kind of jump right into that. We both have the movie in ready in the background so that we can go along with it and kind of reference what we're talking about as we go along. So I'm going to start us off. One of the first things that I want to talk about is the way that it starts. You start off with this beautiful, you get the yellow and black imagery that's notorious with the comic, but then it immediately starts off with this super high pitched, super like ear rattling whistle. And with it, you kind of get the sense of unease that the whole movie is trying to set up for you. And I think doing that is an amazing way to like really set up the tone of the movie and the tone that they're trying to convey or push onto the audience.
No, I would definitely agree to that. The pressure building in the teapot kind of thing.
Yeah. And then it's complemented perfectly by immediately, like fully immediately setting up um the main conflict of the story with the news broadcast that our first character that we get introduced to is watching as a news reporter is or like a daytime talk show host kind of is having a sit down talk and is talking about Richard Nixon and the rising threat of nuclear war. This movie does take place in around the 80s, um, and so you know
85,
and
I believe. That's was
yes.
October 10th, 85 is Rorschach's journal for this.
Yes. And so, they are talking about that immediate threat, which is going to come in later, and we're going to see kind of why, everybody is talking about this. Um, and, like I said, the fact that they immediately start off by setting up the main conflict, that overwhelming threat of nuclear war, it's amazing how quick you can jump into things and not feel like whiplash. Like
Mm.
it never feels like you're in a car that just slammed into a brick wall.
Yeah, and I think it seems I would say maybe it seems a little faster paced than in the book, but like compared to the book, it's shot for shot kind of the same. Of it's just him watching television. You get the side panels of what is going on.
Yeah. And
I will.
as oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say with this opening sequence with the news reports, when it come to Nixon, I I these are just a few of the notes I started with is that as much as I love this movie, Nixon's makeup always gave me a little tussle. Like it's
Oh yeah.
like I would say even I was watching it with my fiance last night and she could not tell that even was Nixon in the beginning.
Yeah.
I thought that was
Like,
funny, but
it
Pat
isn't until he
Buchanan here,
starts
Pat
talking.
Buchanan, I thought Pat Buchanan is fucking flawless. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, especially too, one of my favorite things, is you'll love this because, since most of you are meeting us for the first time, Jake here is also a major Batman fan. I love because this doesn't exist in the comic, but I love that it feels very reminiscent to, The Dark Knight Returns with the panels that they show in the comic of, them
Mhm.
debating about whether Batman is a good influence on Gotham or if he's a scourge on Gotham. And I like that it feels kind of like a little nod or a little love letter to that.
But the just the way they play it off too with the news reports that you can really just like even before we figured out the date, this is like 80s talk show or late night
Oh yeah,
show,
yeah,
news meetings, like and every like one of those things where the way television was in the 80s like that, everybody and their grandmother watched this stuff. So
oh yeah,
it makes more sense why, comedians just in his apartment doing the same.
yeah. And then they especially drive it home on like really getting you put into the setting with the set design. And one of my favorite things about this movie is all the love and care that went into it. And shout out to Jim Erickson. I did my research. He was the set designer for this movie, and like, he did a phenomenal job. Not only does the apartment, and we'll get to see more of it, or we get to see more of it, once the main fight scene happens in this apartment, but even just the little shots that we get of it, the tiny little, like, CRTV boob tube, the rifles on the wall, the pinup, like, the old school, like, 1940s pinup that we get, he sets us in perfectly, not only in the time frame, but also those little nods to show us who the comedian is without even letting him say a word yet. But then, we do finally get, into a little bit more of the action. So, comedian kind of steps over, and that's when we see, our first look at Nixon. And I did want to point out, as Jake had said, Nixon is a little hard to tell that it's Nixon, until he starts talking, and then it feels almost Futurama-y, in my opinion.
What do you mean by Futurama?
Like, it feels almost a little like parody, like,
Oh.
Futurama's Nixon of like, "Hello, I'm not a crook," like, and it's like the only voice that people can do for Nixon.
Yeah.
And I get he sounded like that in real life, but it does, like I said, it does still feel a little Futurama-y.
Actually, so I just brief right down and now that I'm thinking about it. They said this is like his fifth term, right?
His 3rd. So that was the
Third?
other neat thing, that this movie does is, we don't see it quite yet, it happens a little bit later on in the 2nd, opening sequence, but we learn that this world has a few differences from our own, the most notable being that Nixon was never resigned during the Watergate scandal, either it never came to light or he just never resigned or was impeached, and he went so far as to getting term limits, repealed and serving for a 3rd term.
Hmm. It's just now that I think about it, maybe that's why I always find it so off, is that he's also an older Nixon.
Yeah,
Something that, media wise, we never really get to see what it would look like. Because as I'm staring at him now, it's a little more droopier,
yeah,
nose is, uh, I can't think of the word.
yeah, he's
Seems a
very
lot larger because obviously he's aged and
yeah,
yeah.
um yeah, it's very clearly that they're trying to also the makeup too is also great. I forgot to grab the, makeup artists' names, but they do that exceptionally well. Like you said, Pat Buchanan looked fantastic. The comedian, um, we will eventually learn about some scars and some battle wounds, and I mean, the way they adapted how, he would look with that as he aged is great. Uh But, after we see Nixon, we get our first look at, one of the other things and one of the other, overarching themes of the movie is the doomsday clock. And one of the things that I love about it is that it's kind of used as publicity.
Oh yeah, that is,
Like, the idea of total nuclear annihilation for this TV show is, like, a way for them to get views. Like, it's a big white clock, with a bunch of, like, people who are, like, I'm almost
yeah,
certain are not scientists.
they're
They're, like,
probably they're probably producers for the news show. You know,
yeah. Like, it's like a PA and a gaffer in, like, lab coats moving the, minute hand on this big stupid clock to show, "Hey, we're on the brink of total nuclear annihilation."
I
And
feel like
that's one of the
I feel like didn't they actually have a physical clock like this too? That when we were during the Cold War.
I believe so, I wouldn't be surprised, but it is one of those things that I definitely feel like is played up a little bit more in the movies than it probably was in real life, um, because one of the thing when I think Zack Snyder does his best work is when he just punches you in the face with a symbol, and there's no greater punch to the face, in this movie than a broadcaster trying to use the threat of the destruction of the planet for like notoriety and for like views and gain.
I get so I did a quick lookup. During the Cold War, the initial setting was always 5 minutes to midnight. So when you
Yes.
watch them move the clock, they're at 7 minutes, but now they're moving it to five. Those 2 minutes are really going to heighten things up.
Yeah. Especially with what we learn later on in the movie. But I like I said, when in my mind, when Zack Snyder does his best work, it's when he's punching you in the face with his metaphors, with his symbols and other things like that. Past this, once we get to see a little bit more of people talking and kind of one of the big things that we get our first introduction or our first reference to Dr. Manhattan, the only superpowered being in this universe. And for people who maybe have never read the comic or ever watched the movie, I think the movie does a good job of kind of with how early they set him up and with how much they talk about him with this fear of God, and rightfully so. I mean, he is a god for all intents and purposes. Um, but they really set up this like this dread or this fear about who he is and what he represents, even within the first 3 minutes of the movie.
And I would say even for people that don't know anything about this, with the Manhattan Project and him aptly being named after it really helps set up. It really makes you like any newcomer coming into this really understand what it is that they're referring to in some aspect of some kind of great, powerful entity.
Yeah. I mean, anybody with so much as a high school education on American history,
Yeah.
like, you get that sense of dread from not only the Cold War that we're experiencing firsthand, we're seeing, news reports about, the territorial, waters, and other things that are happening between the Soviets and, the Americans, but we are also getting, like you said, that those references to a being who is so powerful that he's named himself after the group of scientists that created the first nuclear bombs.
Emphasis on those, you said, for those in high school kids that know U.S. history. It's because this is a rated R movie, kids. Don't watch it if you're not old enough.
Yes, that is the other thing. Come episodes 3 or 4, we're probably gonna get in some much heavier topics, but, we'll save those for when we get there, but yes, fair warning, this is a rated R movie. There is language, there is heavy themes and other things like that, but for now, we get a lot of fun, and one of my first favorite things about this movie, its impeccable soundtrack. Doctor Ma or I mean, Comedian is kind of flipping through some channels, and he settles on
Oh yeah,
MTV, and they just happen to be playing, Nat King Cole's, Unforgettable
that's
right
right after
as
he switches past MTV. So it's
oh,
like
yeah.
MTV, another news, and then I don't really know what this is. Like, is it a commercial? Is it a movie?
I have no idea because it's, like, hot and heavy, which is another cool thing, to it feels very Adam and Eve because it's this woman, like, laying down on a chair in a pool, and then a man in nothing but underwear walks over to her standing on the water,
Hmm.
and I'm like, "Is that another reference to Doctor Manhattan in this moment?" I'm like, "Feels a little specific."
Yeah, and he's walking on water
Yeah.
too across the pool to get to her.
Also,
But
another
I was gonna say I do have it in my notes too. I just wrote in all caps, "Nat King Cole is a god."
yes, I this
I
movie
love his
made me
music.
adore that song. I mean, I could listen to it for hours. But another favorite bit of this is, shout out again to the set designer. If you look closely next to his TV, they do some shots of the apartment to kind of give you an idea of who comedian is. So he's got like a gun laying on some porno mags on his coffee table, and then directly next to his TV is a statue of what I can only describe as a penis. Like, it's
Oh, let me
very
see.
clearly just a
Let's see if I
penis.
can find it.
I wanna say they show it for, like, a split second right before he starts flicking the channels, but it's very yeah, like, right before it hits MTV, if you
Okay.
look to the left of the TV, it's just a penis, like, head and everything. And I'm like, "Yeah, that feels appropriate for the comedian." This is a guy that we
Oh my
learn
god!
later
Yeah.
this is a guy that we learn later is a vulgar asshole. He doesn't have a care in the world. I mean, he gets his name the comedian because he thinks the world is a joke. And so the idea that he has just a penis sitting next to his TV is hilarious to me. Um so once he starts kind of watching his music video with the impeccable sound design, that's when we get our first bit of action in the movie and a break-in, which I don't know if Zack Snyder had anything to do with this or if he fully let it up to a choreographer, but all of the action in this movie is fucking superb. It is like outstanding.
The one thing I love about it is that it. I mean, for for that level of suspending your disbelief, just all the thud, whip, and like the traditional fight sounds are just so
Yeah.
classic in it too.
This definitely feels like a love letter to not only the comic book, but comic books in general because everything about it, I mean, the characters are moving with such speed and ferocity. I mean, they're punching holes in walls like it's nothing. And that was something that I remember a lot of people gave this movie shit for because in the comics, the comic is very grounded. Like comedian doesn't do this. Like Night Owl doesn't break people's arms. He's fat and he's a loser.
Hmm.
But in the movie, because it's also a love letter to action comics and action superhero movies and other things like that, it's still doing all of this to show like it does it with a purpose. And it's because of that love of what it is and that kind of parody of what it is eventually too.
But I think
Like,
that's I feel like that's also part of. I believe that was part of Zack Snyder's intention because he says it multiple times in terms of the violence in his movies that you shouldn't shy away from it, or like the whole idea of you gotta try to get that PG-13 rating, so let's make the fighting a little better.
yeah,
Because Watchmen came out and it flipped the world of comic books on its head, right?
yeah,
And I feel like he wanted to do the same kind of service when it came to action movies. I know this is before the real like boom of comic book movies, but there's still quite a few. So there's that level of don't shy from the violence because that is literally what's going to happen to these
yeah,
type of characters if they existed. It's
yeah.
not going to be
I
the
mean,
simple little, bonk on the head. I'm dazed and confused, and then cops come up with their gurney. Like
yeah.
that's not how it's going to happen.
And that was something that even, superhero movies that were being praised from this time struggled with, like, I mean, we both love The Dark Knight, but there is a certain degree where I don't believe that Batman is beating the shit out of Joker's goons. It looks like he's karate chopping them to a certain degree. But this movie, I believe that he is fighting this masked assailant. I believe that he is getting the shit kicked out of him.
I do wonder if it is really Vite for some of it too. Like I know some of the choreography I need your stunt actors and whatnot in there, but just in terms of build and presence, it does seem like it is actually Vite sometimes.
Sometimes, other times it feels very clearly not him. There's a moment where the comedian looks up at the masked assailant, and it is very clearly not the actor who it's supposed to be.
Oh yeah.
Like, he looks up and I'm like, "That's some random Swedish guy." Like, that's not the actor it's supposed to be. And then
Mm,
2 other times I'm like, the character that it's supposed to be is fairly lean, fairly, kind of slender build. And other times it looks like he's a brick shithouse. Like, he looks like he's comedian is portrayed by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who is not a small guy by any means. He's a
mhm,
pretty hefty sized dude. And so, like, the character isn't supposed to be that big. And sometimes the assailant who is like a fighting the comedian right now, it's it's a little it's a little obvious sometimes that it's not the same guy, that it's like some bodybuilder jacked dude.
yeah. Spoiler alert, by the fact of me saying who the assailant could be.
Yeah, way to mess it up, man.
Whoops. But
I do also want to point out too, Zack Snyder loves giving himself, filleting himself. Shout out to the nice little 300 reference, as the comedian throws a cup, and destroys his address so that it just reads 300.
I never caught that. I'm gonna go back to it.
You never caught that?
No.
Oh, that's yeah. So
Let's
when
see.
the fight first starts out, comedian tries to get the upper hand so that he can grab his gun, and he
Oh no,
throws
that's
his
his apartment
passport.
number.
Yeah.
Three
Um,
3001. But yeah, the way
yeah.
the cup goes through with
Um,
Zach's perfect slow-mo timing that he loves to do.
yes. I will also give Zack Snyder credit is that when he's given control over it, he knows when to use slow mo. Um,
I would say the other good thing about this too is sometimes in action movies there's way too many cuts during a fight scene. It's like cut for this punch, cut for this punch. Here, there's a good blend of like getting in closer, but there's a series of wider out, like you're a visitor in this apartment watching this battle, and I think
yeah.
that really that it makes the fight better.
Yeah.
The
You
sequence is so easy to watch.
yes. It sits when it needs to sit. Like, it allows the audience to feel each punch, but the cuts come so that you can still feel the speed and the kind of desperation that both these men are fighting for.
Hmm.
One wants both these guys want the other one dead more than you can imagine, and you really get to see that. Um, After the fight, so they end up fighting a bunch. Comedian, gives it his all. Once again, Jeffrey D. Morgan, great actor, perfect as the comedian, gives it his all. And we get to one of my first favorite quotes of the movie. Um, Comedian realizes that he's done for. He cannot go on. So as he is bleeding, he says his infamous line that it's all a joke, and he asks, "Mother, forgive me." Which
So
what we
I wanted to ask you about that. Is there any really big references, excuse me, to his mom at any point in this or in the comics of like what that
no.
relationship really was that he wants his mom to forgive him?
The only thing is that I always wondered if he was actually asking for forgiveness from this kind of unseen mother figure, or if it was more so the kind of biblical mother of Mother Mary. Y I think both are very viable options. Um, Either way, I think it is kind of interesting to see this character who, from what those of us who have seen the movie or have read the book know, is a very just no nonsense character. He doesn't really believe in anything. And so the idea that in his final moments, he's either asking for forgiveness for his wrongdoings from his actual mother or
Or
from
from the figure, but yeah.
the biblical figure, the idea that this can put the fear of God in him is it really shows the kind of threats that we're already dealing with.
Well, I don't know if it really puts fear in him because obviously he's smiling and laughing. It's all a joke. He's aware of it. I don't know if I'd say he's afraid.
I think he would because if I was in that situation and I was begging for forgiveness, I'm afraid of dying. He puts on that show of the world is meaningless, so it's all a joke. But in his mind, there is still that part of him that says it has to have meaning because I don't want to die. If it
I
truly
would
didn't have
no.
meaning, I would die.
No, I'd say more. It's more of a fear of what's after death than the death itself. I don't think he fears death. He fears what comes after.
Yeah, I could see
Hen-
that.
Hence, he wants forgiveness for all the stuff he's done, because who knows what kind of repentance he's going to have.
Oh God, it's gonna be a fucking nightmare for him.
Probably have enough of it. Yeah.
Or if we go by the comics, he'll just wake up and meet Batman. But we don't talk about that. We also get the first shot of the most infamous symbol in all of comic books and in most of media. The comedian is known for his smiley button with a blood spat on it from the blood kind of dripping down from his face. And I mean, that symbol alone,
Oh, and
even
all
from
the all
comics,
the different meanings and metaphors that you could just make out of it, whether it's real world, comic world, this world, DC, like anything,
yeah.
all the metaphors you can make for you know
My
that just that
favorite metaphor
the subtle clash of the blood on the smiley face.
Yeah. My favorite metaphor is a kind of a real life one, because, like we said, this is taking place during the 80s, during the height of the Cold War, during, the nuclear panic. And one of the things that I loved is that in the real world, there was this kind of weird juxtaposition where all this was going on. And yeah, there were some nut jobs who were, out there trying to build bunkers and, get ready for the end times. But the vast majority of society just kept going like nothing happened. Like so much music, so much movies, so many TV shows, everything that was coming out around that time was just so happy and cheery that you kind of forget that there was that overarching that overarching threat of death, of like total annihilation. And I think that smiley face button perfectly captures that.
Agreed.
That and that's probably my favorite metaphor for that button. Just like this willful ignorance to the problems of our world. Uh, but as that sequence ends, we see the comedian fall to his death. And once again, another amazing song starts. And we get Bob Dylan, "The Times They Are Changing," and kind of our first real look at the history of this world, which is another great thing. Is that in Zack Snyder's early years, I think he really did well at the show don't tell mentality, and this is that to a T.
Oh, this opening sequence. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we get to learn everything about each of these characters without them saying a single word. We get to learn that Silk Spectre is just in it for the glam, and so that people can look at her boobs. You know, we get we do get some fun moments too, like seeing Night Owl um, defeat presumably Joe Chill, preventing Batman from being born.
Well, to an extent, because you had got the Batman posters in the background, right? So like, who's Batman in their realm? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Right.
it's
Did
definitely
they?
just kind of a fun nod, but it is still cool to be able to say, "Oh yeah, Night Owl is the reason why this universe never had a Batman."
Mhm.
Um, Another great thing that you start to notice throughout this opening shot is I love the way that they did the credits. Um, Anytime there is a camera flash and there's a credit on the screen, it casts a shadow. And it's one of my favorite things. It's a super small detail, but stuff like that, I mean, it's important because it shows the amount of care and dedication that goes into it.
Mhm.
I also want to say too, we're starting to get to see the old school Minutemen or the original version of the Watchmen, the heroes from the kind of the 40s and the 50s. Once again, amazing costume design. Shout out to Michael Wilkinson. From what I've read, he did everything from the Minutemen costumes to the eventual Watchmen costumes, and they look perfect. I mean, it looks like he picked them out of the comic book. And, like, you see Night Owl too, and he's wearing these tight booty shorts, and your immediate thought is, "That wouldn't translate to live action," and it does, and I'm cowering in my boots seeing him in those booty shorts.
Ooh, can we talk about the Last Supper shot?
Yes, that is one of, if not my favorite, just single shots in this movie.
Who's the old guy in the back with his finger up?
That is, we learn that that's her husband, the
Oh
one
yeah,
who helped
okay, yeah,
raise
that
the
is him. Yeah,
yeah.
okay, I see it now.
So for those of you who are watching along with us or kind of talking about it, we get this beautiful recreation of Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper, where in place of Jesus Christ, we get the original Silk Spectre. Um, Next to her in the spot, what would be the spot of Judas, is the comedian, and we learn more about kind of the symbolism behind that. Um, but I mean, it's an absolutely
Yeah,
beautiful shot.
good foreshadowing that in this split second of a shot that if you're not paying attention, could like you you could have been spoiled if
Yeah,
you could just put those references together. But then
yeah,
the idea too that she's pregnant and uh the way Jesus' story goes with the Immaculate Conception here. So there's the Last Supper and the importance that also is going to put on to Sally's daughter, the next Spectra.
yes. I also
So,
always
so good, so
I,
good.
I'm not a theology major by any means, but I've always wanted to try and figure out if there was any other importance to the placements of some of the other characters, like Mothman, who we eventually see goes crazy in this same
Yeah,
opening sequence,
dragged into the
or
back of the paddy wagon.
yes, or if there's anything important about Captain Metropolis and Hooded Justice, who are also in this sequence. But I mean, either way, like you said, just the symbolism of having the original Silk Spectre standing in the spot of Christ while pregnant during her like retirement supper, it literally being her last supper with the Minutemen. And then uh
I don't know if we
I do
mentioned the beautiful soundtrack of Bob Dylan to go with this too.
yes, I briefly mentioned it, but like I said, the
Okay.
soundtrack in this entire movie is great. These first two choose their songs perfectly because, you get the juxtaposition with the fight between the masked assailant and the comedian with that beautiful love song, and then you get this montage that shows how these heroes adapted, how they started off and where they get to where we pick up with them. Um, Perfectly set aside with or set alongside Bob Dylan's "The Times They Are Changing," which once again, Zack Snyder just smacking you in the face with his metaphors, but it works. The
I
times
think
are a changing.
I think I like the symbolism of it too for the audience that for the times are changing. It's just to also symbolize the fact that we're in an alternate universe kind of realm where very similar to ours, but there's these few subtle instances that are different.
Yes. Like, and this also shows some of my favorite world building moments, including we get to see, um, and I love that they're back to back. They're like one after the other. We see Dr. Manhattan shaking hands with President John F. Kennedy, and then immediately afterwards, it cuts to the day Kennedy is assassinated, and the camera pans, showing um, the Secret Service men rush to the convertible,
Yeah,
seeing Jackie, reach her hand back and try and get help from somebody. And as it pans and follows the car, we see comedian in civilian clothes with a rifle standing on a grassy knoll.
it's
Which,
crazy. It's just like how kind of like shot for shot wise of the Kennedy assassination, pretty flawless to like the actual video of like how
yeah,
they executed it.
yeah, it's a little unnerving. But I do
Yeah,
also love the reference. Because I don't know if you know this, in the Zapruder film, the film that exists of the Kennedy assassination, the most famous one,
Mhm.
um, people claim that on a grassy knoll they can see a puff of smoke and believe that there was either a second gunman or the main gunman was actually on a grassy knoll firing.
And
And so
here we
then
have
we
the
get to see,
comedian with the giant cigar.
yeah, that's my favorite part is, like, literally in all of the CIA and, like, the courts, rulings, people keep saying, I see a second gunman on a grassy knoll and a big puff of smoke." And you just see the comedian let out this giant plume of cigar smoke as he, like, tucks his rifle away and, like, ducks into some fenced off area.
I wonder, like, what's happening in this world that they would have comedian come and assassinate him, that why it's him.
I think part of me thought, well, because, like, one of the theories with the Kennedy assassination, which, all allegedly, I don't wanna die, I'm not suicidal, I love the United States of America, please don't kill me, is that this one of the theories is that the CIA had him assassinated, due to, things like the, Bay of Pigs, invasion and other things like that. And so we do know that the comedian, or we eventually learn, but we know that the comedian works for the government. I
Mhm.
wouldn't be surprised if they were just like, we need some guy who'd be willing to kill the president. Let's get the crazy guy.
Yeah, I'm sure he laughed at it too and, like, considered it an honor.
Yeah. Um, I do also love too the way that they show all of these. It does kind of create, and part of it may also just be the music. It does create the sense of nostalgia for a time that none of us were present for because it never existed. These heroes didn't exist in our world, but we feel nostalgic for them.
Yeah,
Like, we see these shots of Dollar Bill and the Night Owl and, the early comedian, and we almost are like, "Oh, yeah, weren't those good times?" And then you have to stop and remember, those times didn't exist. They existed for a half a second while they were flashing on the screen.
yeah. Well, that goes with what you're saying of the his tell all of show don't tell.
Yeah, which is perfectly encaptured by, one of the kind of last, or close to last shots in this sequence. We see, the original Silk Spectre arguing with her husband as her daughter walks out of her room. And this is another perfect juxtaposition in my mind, of people being so obsessed in their own lives that they're fully just ignoring or fully, ignorant to the problems around them, because as you hear them arguing and screaming at each other, the original Silk
Yeah,
Spectre and, her husband, it slowly pans and their voices become muffled as you watch, what I believe was a real life protest of a man who set himself on fire to protest the Vietnam War. You know, and so it's this perfect like I said, this perfect juxtaposition of people being so obsessed in their own lives that they are fully ignorant to the fact that there is a major war raging that
mhm,
is killing people for no reason. Um, then after that shot, we start to kind of move closer to the present day. We get some teases to characters that we'll get to see, like Rorschach. We get, once again, they're continuing to kind of drive home the growing tensions in the nuclear war. We see the Russians preparing what looks to be hundreds of nuclear warheads. We see a protester getting gunned down, in an attempt to, um, you know, peacefully protest. Another great thing too that I love, and this goes back to what we had said at the beginning about Pat Buchanan, using the threat of war as a way to get views. We get this cool shot of Andy Warhol, with a pop art picture behind him of Night Owl,
mhm.
and that feels very reminiscent of the same thing. Of, you know, we see later on that tensions are growing between the superhero community and people, and part of that is because police are picketing, and are, on, they're, I'm trying to think of the word, picketing, they're
Protesting?
striking,
Strike, oh.
because of the superheroes. And so it does feel kind of the same thing that Andy Warhol is using these controversial people in his world to gain a little bit more notoriety, to, get his 15 minutes of fame.
No, I would agree because there's that level of uh we'll see much later when it comes to Vite of just how a test for fame he is as a superhero too. That he wants to be, considered a god.
Yeah. Which we see almost directly after that. We get a fun little shot of uh, Buzz Aldrin and I almost said Lance Armstrong, but that's the that's the cycler with one nut, Neil Armstrong. We see them on the moon, and in this universe, Dr. Manhattan is filming them, and you see the reflection of him just standing there in like a G string, which is
Yeah,
fun.
right.
But immediately after that, like what you were saying about Vite, we get our first look at Ozymandias, and he's at Studio 54, and you can see the Village People, David Bowie, and I
Yeah,
believe that
you
you know,
you get the subtle David Bowie. That was the one that I picked up on with his, like a lightning bolt face paint that he would wear.
yeah. But you get to see Vite kind of like relishing in this celebrity that he gets um, from being a superhero.
Hmm.
And then another great shot is the new Watchmen taking their, I guess, family or team photo all together, and it's always been hilarious to me because it's like three dudes in body armor, a woman in tight latex, a guy in a trench coat, and then God. Like I always adored that because in this world, for say what you will about the DC universe, but you kind of believe that Batman could meet Superman. In this, you
Mhm.
have to kind of remind yourself, oh yeah, Dan Dryberg is a fat nobody who just got independently wealthy. The comedian is a nutcase who works for the government. Silk Spectre is a nepo baby. Ozymandias is a rich guy, and then there's God in a G string.
Yeah. My first thing too when I see this is like, you're there for a photo op. Can we turn down the glow a little?
Yeah,
Like that photo probably came out like trash.
dude, especially it's like the 80s. They don't have like
Yeah.
good photo technology. That thing is fucking ruined. But that's the last shot that we get of, or that's one of the last shots that we get of this amazing opening sequence, and then that's when we get our first real big hint that something about this world is different, and we see that Nixon has just been elected for his third term amidst a protest. And then we also get our title card, which helped inspire the name of this show that we're doing today. Um, as a man spray paints on a building, "Who watches the Watchmen?" The very famous Latin quote.
Well, I was gonna give you a fun fact of, do you know why the entire building explodes?
No, I
Uh,
didn't. I always just thought that that was a like a design choice.
I think, well, I do wholeheartedly also think it's the design choice because it's also captured by the last final directed by Zack Snyder.
Yeah.
Uh, it's the old school gas tube TVs, man. The dude
Oh
throws a
yeah.
Molotov into it, so
I
what do
guess
you think's
yeah.
gonna happen?
If you throw a Molotov into a bunch of gas, it's just gonna set off a
Yeah,
firebomb.
I love it. I I just also love, like, Zack Snyder knows when to put his place and his stamp on it, and that's a good one as we
Yeah.
tris as we transition back into the death of the comedian.
It also feels a little Michael Bay-ish. Like it feels like
Yeah.
directed by Zack Snyder.
Arr.
Boom. But yes, we do
Oh,
immediately from that fireball cut back to the comedian. But there's something kind of sad about it because it's just the street that he and fell to his death on, as some poor guy just unceremoniously washes
yeah,
away his
just
blood.
wash it away.
Like, I'm sure
Just
they got the samples that they needed, but it just feels sad. Like, there's no, trumpets, there's no nothing. It's
well,
not
that's
it's
that's the joke of it too, in a way.
yeah. But I mean, it's made even sadder because as the guy is washing it, we see some hobo just step across the blood holding a sign that says the end is nigh.
I
And
don't think
it
it's a hobo. I think it might be Rorschach
what makes you say that?
because he's always the one carrying the sign in that. So I'm watching the sequence because
Spoilers! I was trying not to spoil.
oh,
Yeah, for those who don't know, I mean, it's the movie makes it a little bit more clear than the comic book does. We're gonna see this man holding the "End is nigh" sign, quite often. That is Rorschach outside of his costume. He's just kind of everywhere.
I think we could go along with saying this is 2000. This movie came out in 2009. If you haven't seen it,
Yeah, I guess you have had 16
my
years to watch
bad.
this.
I know. It's like Kennedy got shot. What? Spoiler alert.
But, so as we cut away from, the unceremonious washing the blood, we just get some gumshoe detectives, kind of going through, the comedian's apartment. We get,
Hmm.
a look at his real name, Edward Blake, and
We
they
get
just don't find it.
6'2", 225 solid.
Yeah, that dude, once again, like, and I'm
Took
just
it.
sure they just took, like, that it's probably in the comics from the gumshoes that are talking, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they just took Jeffrey Dean Morgan's real measurements, and we're just like, yeah, let's just say that,
Yeah.
because he's amazing. Um, but they talk, they don't really find anything, and then we get our first real introduction to Rorschach, the noted crazy person of the movie. Um, we also get in the comic they use his thought bubbles. Thought bubbles are a big thing in comic books in general. We don't get that in this movie. Instead, we just get the audio of his journal entries. He keeps a journal where he kind of discusses his theories and his ideas, and we get him talking about how much he hates the world and women that he doesn't like and people that he doesn't like. As he uses this amazing grappling hook, which absolutely could not exist in the 80s, to grapple up 50 stories and then perfectly land on the edge of a busted windowsill. Which, once again, say all you want. I remember a bunch of people gave this movie shit because, oh, the action's unrealistic. The comic was so much more realistic. That's a thing in the comic, too. Like, for all Alan Moore tried to ground these people in reality, he did also still give Rorschach a grapple gun and allowed him to do weird shit like this.
Yeah. I don't think it's too far off to say for the sake of it working, like in terms of just shooting up and hooking, I think it would exist, but to automatically also pull him back, that's the only stretch. He'd probably have to climb it. So
Yeah.
old school 1960s Batman stuff. But
But
I
at
gotta
the same
say,
time,
oh, I was gonna say for the
if we're
sequence, I just love the fact of like, so you're getting into his journal, right? And he's
yes.
he's the cold raspy voice going into what his ideology are, and then like as he's grappling it up, he's like, they will look up and shout, "Save us!" And I'll say, "No." I'll whisper, "No," and it's just
Yeah.
how when it comes to the dialogue of the sequence and for it to time up perfectly with him launching into the window for that shot for "I'll whisper no." Oh,
Yeah.
so exhilarating. Tells you everything you need to know about Rorschach and like his dark, demented mind of how he sees the world as a hellscape on Earth kind of thing.
Yeah. And, like,
And
to his
it's
weird
like
morality.
you'll get no pity from me for all the stuff that goes on here, kind of thing.
Yeah. Plus, too, like, the way that they have the direction of it, which, full credit to Zack Snyder in this, having him look up perfectly into the camera, seeing the ink blot on his mask as
Yeah,
he says, and I'll whisper no. I mean, it sends chills down your spine the first time that you see that mask up close.
And I love too because like in terms of a comic, it's hard for the artist to make the Rorschach block consistent throughout the entire time. So the fact that
Yeah,
they incorporated into the movie too that it's like a live breathing Rorschach mask.
yeah.
Oh, so good.
'Cause they eventually in the comics, they would eventually describe why Rorschach's mask always changed. They said which is this is another cool piece of world building that they did eventually, and this was done after, Alan Moore, or I believe it might have been in the comic as well. I have to go through my book, but it's based on a real life, murder case, the murder of Kitty Genovese. She was this woman in New York who was killed and assaulted and had like hundreds of bystanders who witnessed it, but nobody said a thing. Like nobody called it in. In the comics, it's revealed that Rorschach's mask comes from a dress that was supposed to be picked up that night by that woman, and it was an experimental like dress where it was uh, like a heat reactive fluid compressed between two layers of cloth.
Interesting.
But I always like even the connections that he has to like the seedy underbelly of New York, even in um his own origin story, always fascinated me too. But we get to see Rorschach do his kind of shtick as he is this world's detective. Um, he's also a fun little parody of the Question, the classic Fawcett or Charleston comic um, character that eventually became a DC character. And he's just kind of going through the apartment building, and he's discovering more about the comedian. We get to see, you know, we really start to learn just how connected the comedian was with the government. We see him shaking hands with Nixon. Um,
That was one I froze on because I don't know what it is about it, but his posture in that photo with shaking hands with Nixon, it
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 does
just
look a
see
little
it
weird.
it looks nerdy. I don't know if it's like it's because it's the old school 6-button suit,
Yeah.
you know. It
Part of me
doesn't
also
look as
thinks,
he's just not as menacing as well, and his kind of shoulders are kind of like shrugged up.
yeah, I think they did that. Like, I think that was an in-universe decision too. Of like, well, we don't want this guy towering over President Nixon. Like, we want you to be here to support Nixon and show Nixon is powerful. So make yourself look frumpy.
Yeah, right. That could be. Now that you say that, I could see that. It's like
Yeah,
some kind of it's just for the photo op and like all the White House meeting that he happens to come in for this shot. You could tell there's like some kind of producer or something in the back. Like, hey, Nixon really hates it when he gets outshined, so
yeah.
we're gonna put this oversized suit on you. Shrug your shoulders.
Also, knowing what we know now about the comedian, I wouldn't be surprised too if he just didn't own a suit and so he rented something that didn't fit him. He was just like, I don't want to be doing this. I'm just doing it because
Oh
I
yeah,
support Nixon.
he took it from the producer that told him to slouch. He's like, okay, give me your suit.
Yeah. Like he fully would have shown up in a tank top if they would have let him.
It's interesting how much Spectre memorabilia he keeps throughout the house.
It's a little unnerving, especially based on what we learn. I mean, he has pinup posters of her. He has signed photographs from her. I mean, he even has stuff that features the second Silk Spectre.
Hmm.
Like,
Well,
part of
so
it
this
does feel a little unnerving.
this is what I think is interesting. So in the apartment itself, you see all the old Spectre memorabilia, but it's when Rorschach starts digging through and finds the his secret armory in the closet. That's where you get the daughter. That's the only image we got of her.
Yes.
It's
Nope,
so
there's one
so
more
is
on his
it
dresser. There's a very, 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 very quick shot on his, like, dresser or something of, um, some, like, banquet dinner that he must have it was the banquet dinner it was some banquet dinner that he was at for the
sure?
government because if you look, it's him standing next to the second Silk Spectre, and he tore the photo because, it had, Dr. Manhattan in the photo. and it's like a super like blink and you miss it kind of shot.
No, I'm saying that's the one. Oh, I guess okay, it is outside. So the way the camera is, I thought it was inside of the closet, but
Oh no, yeah,
it's in the forefront on the left behind Rorschach looking into the closet. So I guess it isn't inside.
yeah.
I stand corrected.
But that's the only photo we see of her outside of the closet is this one photo that he has of him and her dressed up, and he tore Dr. Manhattan out of the picture.
Mhm.
And then the only other photo that he has of her is that photo that they took at the beginning of the movie. Um, when they were in the Watchmen and they were doing their, um, group photo.
I think one of my favorite parts watching with the fiance is so now the cops come in, right? Because they heard something.
Yes.
The one cop leans over and says, "Hey, watch the door." What's he do? Immediately goes into the kitchen and not watch the door.
Which is like I called them gumshoes earlier. That's the perfect, like, most gumshoe thing ever of just like, "Hey, watch the door, make sure nobody sneaks up on us," and then immediately goes to make himself like a sandwich in the kitchen. We're gonna end it off to so after he makes his presence known to the cops, he has this great, like, super almost paranormal moment where the cop comes back, sees his buddy laying on the ground, and Rorschach is standing on the edge of the um, busted window, and it feels like paranormal. It almost feels like a horror movie. The way that
Yeah,
the cop shines his light over, sees him standing there, and then shines it up and sees this moving ink blot mask on Rorschach's face.
and then he
Um,
even shoots 3 times, but the way that they do it too with Rorschach just still standing there, and the next thing you know, he's gone.
yeah, it
Very,
implies that
very,
either
very
they
good,
fully
very
missed.
eerie.
Yeah. Like, the implication is either somehow this cop fully missed or that Rorschach is truly, like, somehow magical.
No, I
Um,
wouldn't say that. I would
yeah,
say it's more of the view of the cop that it was a terrifying situation, and I feel like kinda just like Batman, cops in New York City here know about Rorschach, and he's developed his own type of,
mythos.
lore, yeah, about him
Yeah,
that even him with the flashbang of the gun trying to shoot at him, that's what makes him appear like, "I shot him thrice, and next thing I know, he's just gone.
yeah,
It did nothing to him." Like, it's one of those things. I would take it more perspective of the cop.
yeah. But then it ends off to we get the last note in, this journal entry for Rorschach, which, once again, spine chilling, like, it gives me goosebumps every time I listen to Jackie Earl Haley say it. "Tonight, a comedian
It
died in New York."
straight from the
Um
comic. Perfect.
Yes, straight from the comic, but that's one of the things, and I'm gonna say this a lot throughout this movie. Jackie Earle Haley is probably my favorite performance in this movie. He kills it as Rorschach. The voice, the inflection, everything he does for Rorschach.
Yeah, what's beautiful about it's one of those things of in terms of a medium, this was always a book, right?
Yes.
So it's almost like even if you read it before the movie came out, I feel like most people had the same thought process in terms of how he talked,
Yeah.
his movements, that kind of thing. Like it's pretty spot on. Like it feels eerily meant to be, you know.
Yes. It definitely, that's one of the nice things too. One of the reasons why I love this movie and why I love a lot of movies that adapt comic book storylines is you get things that you don't get from the comic. You don't get inflection or voice. Like, you can read it in somebody's voice, but I mean this movie really, I mean, I can't read the Watchmen book without hearing uh Haley's voice doing Rorschach. But that is where we're gonna end off, at least the movie wise. Like I said, we're gonna kind of take this in 10 to 15 minute chunks. And we just got really set up with a lot of the characters. We're getting to meet a lot of the pawns and a lot of the chess pieces on this board. And
All of the
we
Watchmen.
Yes, we met all the Watchmen, we met the Minutemen, um, and we got set up for a lot of really interesting stories and story beats that we're going to get to learn more about coming up. But was there anything else that you want to talk about? Other moments that we saw from these first 15 minutes that maybe we didn't touch on, or any other kind of things that you wanted to talk about?
Um, trying to just go over what's here. Ooh, one thing I didn't mention back in when Rorschach's digging through his apartment,
Hmm.
the knife that's in the Spectre that comedian threw, the knife that's in the Spectre poster, the way
Yeah.
it plays off with the shadow of the night sky, it looks like a batarang, and I thought that was awesome. Good foreshadow. It's like almost to fast forward into 2017. It's literally the batarang shot that we got, the first batarang shot we got in Batman v Superman.
Oh yeah, which
Same angle, same like shadow and backlight onto it.
yeah, even for all of the faults that I do give Snyder in his later works, it's very hard for me to ever say he doesn't make things look beautiful. This
Zero
whole
faults.
movie,
Zero
this
faults, Wyatt.
this whole movie is a masterpiece in my opinion, and it looks beautiful. And even shots like that, like you said, where he knows how to play with angles, he knows how to play with light, he knows how to play with props and other things like that, and it's absolutely beautiful.
Mm. Oh, I think we pretty much nailed those first 10 to 15 minutes.
Perfect. Well, then we're gonna cut it off here. Thank you for joining us. It's you know, kind of expect this from now on this channel, and hopefully we'll also get it up and running on, depending on how this works out. Hopefully get this up and running on a few other podcast platforms, which details will come on the social media account that is going to be related to this channel. Aside from that, thank you for joining us. Expect more from us hopefully soon, and we will be signing off after we have just watched The Watchmen. Thank you for joining us.